Hello, everyone. We are just getting ready to get started with author Anton Jones. And we're going to have a discussion here in just a minute. Live in conversation. I am now going to invite him. There we go. Hi, Heather. All right, we're just going to wait a second for Anton to hop on here. Hi there. Hello. All right. I invited Anton. Hopefully he sees it. All right. Well, this is exciting. I'm getting ready to interview Anton Jones, the author of This Is Not a Death Sentence, a memoir. Okay, all right. Anton says you've joined. So, Anton, did you see my invite to you? Go live. Okay. Hopefully you see that. Uh, okay. Says you're unable to join. So let me try this again. Sometimes Instagram can be so annoying. There we go. All right. Hi, Anton.
Hello, I was trying to join with my computer, but apparently I need an app for it. So
Yes.
it's on the phone
Yeah.
now.
Yep, that is exactly what happened to me today when I was like doing like a sound check or whatever you want to call it. And it was like, no, you need an app. I'm like, I don't have the capacity to handle another app at this point in
Yep.
my life. So we've got this. I'm so glad you're here and welcome. And for those of you that are still here, we've got 5 people that are joined live, and hopefully more will join in as the evening goes on. And so I'm just going to introduce you, just a short introduction, and then I'll let you sort of say whatever you add, anything you'd like to say. But so this is Anton Jones. He's a professor, and he graduated with his MFA from Portland State University. He works now as an assistant professor of English at Concordia University in Chicago. Okay, so it says, in the spirit of Catalyst. Is that correct? Did I say that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm
You're
sorry.
fine.
He and his friends attribute their love for writing to spend Friday nights around a campfire, roasting each other with comedic poetry. I would love to be a fly on the tree for that. No?
Um,
No? No?
so there's we were all high school boys, and so you can imagine what kind of poetry we were writing, and we called it burn papers because we burned them afterwards because they were terrible. So
Well,
it was still a lot
and
of fun
when,
though.
yeah, but at least there was no evidence, right?
Well, I mean, I did keep them. I did keep a lot of them too because
Ah,
it's nostalgia, and I do like to bring them up every now and then. For
there you go.
example, the latest time was a couple of years ago. I brought them to my friend's wedding, and I made them into scrolls so that they had this like religious ethos to them, and
Yeah.
unrolled them like they're like 40 feet long of how much like bad, terrible poetry we were writing, and so it was a lot of fun to just go through and reread those things.
But really, really good memories, right?
Oh, absolutely,
Really
yeah.
great memories. Well, I'm really glad that we're doing. I'm so excited. We started working together about a year ago on the book, and I can't believe how quickly this year has passed. And I'm very, very excited. And this is, I always say that when I publish a book, oh my gosh, this is one of my favorites, because they all are, because I handpick these books, and I'm so blessed and lucky to have the authors that I do, but this is very different. This is a very different type of memoir, and I I just think that it's something that everyone should read. And these are the books and the voices that I hope to publish, and the stories that I hope to get out there. That's why I created the Empowered Press. So I'm going to give everybody that's joined us a little bit of background information on This Is Not a Death Sentence. So This Is Not a Death Sentence takes readers through the complexities of life on the schizophrenic spectrum. narrated through Anton's vivid, courageous, and hauntingly beautiful poetry. From navigating depression and mania to boxing, homelessness, fatherhood, and grappling with reality itself, Anton's words capture the relentless fight against stigma and despair. Each poem is a lens into his journey of resilience in the Pacific Northwest, revealing both the shadows and sparks of hope along the way. And I mean, I remember when I presented you with this description, you're like, oh, Jill, I was like, no, literally, take it from someone who's read this, that's not you. This is exactly what this memoir feels like. And I think in light of the, just the camaraderie around mental health and the importance of, of normalizing mental health, just the term mental health, and allowing others to feel like they belong and that they're heard. I think that this is where this, regardless of the term, the diagnoses, the issue, I think that this brings in kind of your memoir really encapsulates all of it. And it does so in verse. And I think the beautiful thing about poetry, this is just my stance on poetry, is that poetry is so personal for everyone. Not only is it personal for the author, but it's more so personal for the reader. And so I think each reader can take something and relate it to their lives. And this book is no exception. So before we get started, we're going to talk, some of our talking points tonight are going to be about, resilience and survival, memoir in verse as a medium, because a lot of people may not be familiar with that. A lot of people are familiar with song, right? Song lyrics, and putting our thoughts and feelings. I mean, we all know who Taylor Swift is, right? And she's like the one who writes all about like her feelings, right? And her stories. But that's a medium. But I think that we don't think about memoir writing in terms of lyrical, in terms of poetry. And I think that this is just such a powerful memoir and powerful way to have written your memoir in a way that is not only art, but also it really takes us into your mind, not only from the lines and stanzas, but also the aesthetic, because the aesthetic of this book, the layout of this book is also extremely brilliant, in my opinion. And it really speaks to the whole of your story. So we're also going to talk about like Pacific Northwest influence, why, the PNW really has kind of has a position or plays a character in this, in your memoir, and then sort of the stigma and empowerment as well. And not trying to be cliche in those words, but those are the words that I just used. So before we start, is there anything that you'd like to share, Anton? And by the way, Anton's book will be released December 3rd. However, you can pre-order it. And when we are done with this live, I will make sure that everybody has the link to pre-order his memoir in verse. And also, Anton, I'll also let you tell them about the video that they'll get with the pre-order. So I'm going to turn this over to you. If there's anything you'd like to say before we start questions.
So let's see. So you want me to talk about the video that's they're going to get with pre-order?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That'd be
So
great.
yeah, if you do pre-order, there is a video that is linked in the receipt. It is in all caps, so as to try to make sure that people don't miss it before they exit out. And it's essentially about 10 minutes of me kind of talking about one of my favorite poems that's from the first section of the memoir. And it talks a little bit about the project as a whole, talks a little bit about my view of dating-ish and my view of seeing romance portrayed in fiction as well as other forms of media. And then it's just a reading of that poem.
Right. And the title of that poem?
Laniakea.
Oh, and it's one of my favorites too. It's beautiful, very beautiful. And I think too, I know that after I watched, and I've read this book about as many times as you have. So, um, so I really love that you were able to give readers, offer readers that sort of behind the scenes, and it really, to me, it really it fleshes out and it helps readers to really, I think, connect even more so with the memoir as a whole. So any of you that have not purchased the memoir already, please do so. Um, Again, we release on December 3rd. You will have your copy um, by December 3rd or even before. So now is the time to go ahead and order, and it's very exciting. So if you're ready, is there anything else you'd like to say before we start our questions at all?
Mm-hmm. I think we're good to jump into the questions.
Perfect, perfect. All right. So the first question, the first thing, the first talking point is really crafting the memoir in verse. Now, this is the second poetry book, memoir in verse, that I have published. I mean, this year, it just blows my mind that that this is the second one, because I've never done that before. So this was very exciting to me. But crafting the memoir in verse, your memoir takes the form of poetry, which we talked a little bit about. It is a powerful choice. Can you talk a little bit about what made you use verse to tell your story, excuse me, as opposed to prose?
Yeah, there's kind of two answers to that. There's the short answer is I'm better at writing poetry so far, and
Well, that's
I
a
have only
good reason.
recently. Yeah, there's only recently have I started writing more in prose, but I think this is also a story that couldn't really be told in prose either. Despite it, like the short answer or the simple answer being that I'm just kind of better at writing poetry. The I think the longer, more real and kind of fleshed out answer is that I have always been a fan of hybrid works. Even in college and undergrad, I was doing a lot of my senior projects were combinations of poetry as well as narrative. I like the narrative, the kind of momentum that fiction has, but I also love how much creativity you can use in poetry with
Mm.
words on the page, the way you can break lines. It allows for so many more interesting forms of like tools such as enjambment or polyvocality, or just the kind of ambiguity of certain things that you can say that you can't really do in fiction all the time. Or at least I'm not good enough at prose yet to convey some of those things. So I think that telling these things in poetry helps people kind of understand the kind of um, journey it is to go with knowing who you are and knowing what your mind is like, and then
Mm.
having that kind of stripped away from you, and then having everything being scrambled, and having things not make sense anymore. And so a lot of times in the book, punctuation is fleeting.
Hmm.
When there are poems that punctuation is like something that's a struggle, and it's almost like a character in the book is when in certain poems have less and less form, less and less punctuation, and they're kind of all over the place to kind of reflect the kind of states I was in.
Yes.
So I mean, that's more of the longer fleshed out reason for why poetry, I think, is the best way to tell this.
Yeah. No, no, and I agree with you 100%. And I did want to. I'm glad you added the whole hybrid component to this, because I think it's, a lot of people will say, well, poetry, that's just not my thing. But I think that, excuse me, the poetry, because this book is we do say it's memoir in verse, right? But there is sections of prose.
Yeah,
And the prose, to me, the prose is a palate cleanser in a way, right? So in the way that you and Katie Katie Moody, who is she did the layout. Brilliant job, by the way. She did
Absolutely.
brilliant. But you had a vision in mind, and so the way that because she read it, and I remember you saying, I want the aesthetic to illustrate what my brain was going through within this moment. I mean, right, you said that, correct? I mean,
Yeah.
not maybe verbatim, but and I think that's what's so beautiful about this is because we can, and to your point, not only are we reading these lines and these stanzas, but we're also, to me, we're able to almost see inside of your mind at this point. And then you break off into the prose. And the prose is where we get our palate cleansed and we're able to like almost, because it is heavy, right? But it's heavy in a good way. And it's like, okay, so here's a palate cleanser, or maybe a break in the act, or whatever we want to call it. But that prose, the way that you've written that prose, it really helps readers to understand and connect. And it's almost like a bridge from one poem to whatever the next section is, or maybe the next poem. At least as a reader, even though I'm the publisher, I'm still a reader. That is how I read the memoir.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. Where a lot of the prose sections offer grounding for sure, whereas the poetry sometimes kind of resists it intentionally.
Intentionally, exactly. Right, right.
And there are some poems that are more prose than they are lineated. And by the end of them, they become chaotic or they become more lineated. And so there's the kind of what I would consider the climax of the book there's these two very long poems right in the beginning of part 3, called "And if that is what breaks you," and then "Unravel," where the poems start in a more controlled prose that is kind of depicting what's going on, and then it kind of this is also where I find out the diagnosis, and once I receive the diagnosis, it kind of breaks. And then the next poem, called "Unravel," is trying to put all these pieces back into context, and eventually it kind of comes together.
Yes.
So those are a lot of the things that I can do intentionally, especially with hindsight. Trying to, none of these were written while I was experiencing like psychosis or a manic state or anything like that. I would not be capable of writing anything during one of those states. But they're all kind of written with hindsight, with reflection of what was going on, and very much edited. With a clear mind after the fact.
Really love that you say that. I really love that you offered that piece of backstory right to this. That's really important. That's brilliant. Thank you for that. All right, so let's talk about a little bit about the title of your book. And as an author and a publisher, I remember when you came to me with the title of the book, I wasn't crazy about the title of the book. I'm so sorry. Excuse me.
You're good.
But then the more I thought about it, and I remember asking you about it, and I don't know, you may not even remember me asking you about it. I think I did it in some sort of an email. But it made sense to me. And then when I kept, having to go back, obviously as I'm publishing it and doing the developmental edit on it and speaking to my team about it, they were all like, "Jill, this is it's the perfect title." So the title obviously is "This is not a death sentence." It sends a message, it does send a message of hope and survival. How did you maintain your sense? In fact, maybe we should back up a bit and just talk a little bit about, wherever you're comfortable, Anton, about your diagnosis, not anybody else's, not anything, if you're comfortable, only if you're comfortable talking about your diagnosis, just so to give people a little bit of a background so that they understand what really is the grounding, what really is the precipice of the meaning of this diagnosis.
Yeah.
Or they can wait to read the book. But if you're comfortable sharing some of it, just to give a little insight so that they understand when we say the words like diagnosis,
Right.
and this is not a death sentence, what this book really is centered around.
Yeah, I probably should have said that at the beginning when you asked me if there's anything I wanted to say. This would have been helpful information for me to clarify to
It's all okay.
to people watching. Yeah. I first started experiencing symptoms in right around the end of 8th grade, start of high school. Before that, I was a pretty outgoing, kind of energetic kid in like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and then I started more so isolating a bit. It was noticeable because I know some of my middle school teachers brought it up to my mom, and this is often the case for things that are like there's like an onset period almost before real symptoms start, but towards the end of 8th grade and then the start of high school, I started noticing different things such as auditory hallucinations. Mainly, this is kind of scrambled thoughts, noises that aren't there. It's not necessarily just voices, especially not all the time. And I didn't think that was unusual because you're not necessarily in anyone else's head and you can't really hear or what they're way hear. So it's not something I ever really brought up. But eventually, though, it started, the more that stress builds up, the more kind of exaggerated the symptoms become. I'm not experiencing symptoms all the time. It's just when stress builds and builds and builds and there's no way to escape from it. So the more I got stressed out in high school, the more these auditory hallucinations started to take on a different, more sinister sort of tone. They became like tangible or like auditory voices that I could recognize and distinguish. And the let's see. Forgive me. This is important to talk about, but it is a little difficult. But I definitely want to say it. So just
I only want you to talk about what you're comfortable, Anton. You don't have to traverse into anything that you are not comfortable talking about.
No, it's fine. It is hard though. But
yeah.
So these voices I thought were religious in context. I thought God was talking to me. And then when it started taking on more sinister tones, I thought I was being possessed. I thought it was demons. And oh man, sometimes they would drift in and out of things that would be coherent, and sometimes it'd be very clear what they were saying. But sometimes it wouldn't make sense at all. Just gibberish or like, I don't know. I think I described in the book as like auditory scrambled eggs. Sometimes it's scarier when you can't make sense of what they're saying. But there was no real way for me to confirm whether or not any of this was just in my head or whether it was a religious experience, because I was also under kind of a delusion that I was important enough for God to talk to me and to give me assignments and things along those lines. So it's really hard to kind of pinpoint what is real and not, especially with delusions.
And you're young. You were young.
Yeah.
And that's got to play a role in all of this, right? Because you're young. You only know what you know when you're that age.
Right. So with those delusions, with all that being, with all those voices and everything, eventually I opened up to my mom about it. After like some friction we had. I was becoming more and more reclusive, more and more that I spent more time in the basement just kind of writing nonsense, and that it was concerning and that it was affecting everyone else. And so I eventually told her what was going on and that I was hearing these things that were essentially telling me to hurt myself. That realized like, oh yeah, that's probably not normal. We should probably take you to a hospital for that. So being told what and what isn't normal is, you would think it'd be intuitive, but it's not. I think one of the reasons why I think this poetry is very important is because you can jump into a character's perspective. You can jump into any sort of fictional story and be able to understand how they think rationally. You can't really do that with a diagnosis like this. It's very hard to understand someone's point of view when it's irrational. So this in high school, I wasn't really given a diagnosis because I was a minor at that point. But I was put on risperidone for the auditory hallucinations. There were some visual ones, but they were not nearly as frequent, and thankfully that remains the case. But the once I was in college, I didn't really have to. They kind of like recessed a little bit. A lot of the more noticeable symptoms kind of went away a bit. There were still some definitely mood swings, more like manic episodes, and me just having like way too much energy, being way too impulsive, way too prone to be getting addicted to things. But it wasn't necessarily something that I would consider dangerous. It was more like hypomania rather than actual like manic states. And by the time I got to Portland, and different stressors started being introduced to my life, they became much more real, much more apparent that this wasn't going to go away and that there was something that I had to do. By that point, the stress was enough where like the visual hallucinations were pretty prominent. They weren't a daily occurrence, but they happened pretty frequently. The thing about the hallucinations is that of most of the time I was sound enough of mind to understand what is real and what was not, unless I was having like delusions paired with it. The delusions you still can't really, because your mind is kind of altered to a delusional state, you can't really tell what's real. You don't even know that what you're experiencing is question or subject. It's like dream logic. So yeah, by that point it had gotten pretty bad, and had to seek like proper treatment, but for a long time I was kind of barred from proper treatment too because of how insurance works, or because of the healthcare system, and going to a doctor or even trying.
And you write about that. You write about that. I mean, that's very you write, and that to me, those were some of the most compelling pieces of this. It's I mean, you write a lot about that in your book.
There are doctors for sure. Like one of the most frustrating ones was trying to get into like just go get a checkup, and then from there get a recommendation from a doctor to go see a psychiatrist because I know what was going on. I'm not an idiot. And I know my family has a history of it too. So to me, it makes sense that I should be like pretty quickly sent over to a psychiatrist, get a diagnosis, get medication, get proper treatment. And then this doctor, like essentially asked me if I was drinking enough water. And I have a jug of water I carry around with me all the time. It's like I drink like 1.5 gallons of water every day. It asked me if I was getting enough sleep. I mean, that's fair. These are definitely valid questions to have as a doctor. But at the same time, I was letting him know that I was hallucinating.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's not usually a cause of from just like chronic dehydration or anything.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. If
Um,
you're walking into that doctor's office, you're not completely dehydrated that you can't,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, by
So
that point you'll be in the hospital if it's from dehydration.
yeah. But so this advice that I should sleep more and drink more water costs $300, by the way. Um,
Yeah.
um, that's a there's a lot of that for a while too, until I was able to finally get into seeing both a psychologist and a psychiatrist, receive diagnosis, and then receive medication as well, which for a long time we couldn't really find anything that worked for it.
Mm,
Um, so that's essentially the background.
right.
Um,
Well, I want to thank you for sharing that, and I appreciate you sharing that. That was kind of off the cuff. I know we didn't really talk about that. And I'm, thank you for being comfortable enough to share it so that people understand the background. But even if they didn't, and even if you didn't, your story tells it all. But I really appreciate the bravery, and that's not an easy thing to do, Anson. And so thank you so much. And that, it's helpful to other people as well. So thank
mhm.
you for that. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing that I want to. Well, two things. One, I'm bad at taking compliments, so if you ever give me a compliment, I'm most likely just going to give you a blank stare because I am assessing whether or not I believe your compliment and whether I believe it myself, and then have to give some sort of response, and that just takes too many steps, and by that
I
time, I've
understand.
moved on in conversation. But
I understand.
so then the second thing is I don't want to be made into like a figure that is like brave or anything like this. It's an illness. It should be taken seriously, but it's not necessarily like something like that's like a part of my identity or that I'm proud
Nope.
of or that I
Nope.
would wave around. It is just an illness, and it needs to be taken seriously. And there's nothing really brave about having an illness.
No, there's not, but there's something brave in feeling like you can talk about something that's really, really difficult to talk about.
Sure.
And in that, showing others that they too don't have anything to be ashamed of.
Right.
Hence, this is not a death sentence.
Right. I just want to just because of how much literature and movies and things I've consumed, I just really really want to discourage people, whether this is real or not. This might be an irrational thought. I just don't want people romanticizing different aspects of like uh, getting an illness or being a victim or
Yep.
anything along those lines. It's I can't really put words to it, but it's icky to me. So
Sure.
that's just a clarification that I do not, I do not
Right.
view myself as any
No,
sort
I
of
think I think it's clear.
yeah.
I think it's important to say that there's nothing romantic. This is your life, and it does not identify you. It is not a part of your identity. It just is a part of your life.
Hmm.
And this book is a part of your life, and this is a story that you're sharing, and there's a lot of reasons for it, and
Yeah.
but it's definitely not for. There's no like ulterior motive to this. It's just this is my story, and I'm sharing it.
Yep. Absolutely.
Thank you
Hmm.
for that. So we kind of talk, I mean, really, in everything that you said, we talked, the title of your book, This is Not a Death Sentence. Well,
Oh, I kind of got away from
but
that.
no, you didn't. Not at all. It was, how did you maintain your sense of determination? Well, I mean, at the end of the day, and how does the theme come across in your poetry? The theme, to me, as a reader, the way that it comes across in your poetry is exactly what you encapsulated. It just is what it is.
Hmm.
Right? There's nothing romantic. We're not romanticizing it. There's nothing, we're not whatever. This is not a death sentence. It's not a cliche. It's not a death sentence. It's not a trend. It's nothing. It's nothing like that. It is real, and it doesn't identify the person. And I think that that because of social constructs, in a way, when we hear a diagnosis, whether it be cancer, It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't, right? Whether it be cancer, whether it be a mental, it's not a death sentence. And I think that your title, as far as I feel, this is the way I interpret it, the way I feel about it. This is not a death sentence. It's not. It's not an identity. It's not a death sentence. It's not. It's just something that you have gone through. It is something that you deal with. It's something that you face. It's something that you and you basically encapsulated that in everything by sharing your backstory. I think that you
Yeah.
basically explained why
There
the
is
title is the title.
there is one or two things I could say about the title. So the title plays off the stigma a lot about being on the schizophrenic
Mm-hmm.
spectrum. Whereas it's definitely a negatively viewed diagnosis. Whether you are someone who is familiar with it or not, people will look at you and think different things about you if they know this about you ahead of time. If they don't know who you are before they know this first. So it's both a reassurance to myself that it is something I can live with and can maintain a good life with, as well as something for the rest of like society. This is
Sure.
not something that like puts me on the same class as someone who is like a murderer, who
Right.
should receive a death sentence. There is
Ah, right.
nothing. There's nothing that most of the time people with this illness are not violent. They're usually the people who experience violence because of the situations that they're in. And so that's also something that I think the title is trying to communicate.
Okay. Right. Fair. I mean, I absolutely thank you
Mm-hmm.
for clarifying that, because that even flips it on me a little bit, right? It it's not a death sentence personally to you, but it's also not a death sentence. And I think you made a very good point there. So I appreciate that a lot, and I'm glad we discussed that, because there's another side to that. Because again, we all think of this as not a death sentence, as this is not going to make us die. This isn't going
Yeah.
to kill us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of ways to look at that statement. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's a lot of boxing and physicality. You talk about that. Can you share how boxing and physicality connect to your mental health journey, and why you felt it was important to include this in your narrative?
Yeah. Um, so I've um, when I was younger, I was always pretty terrible at sports, but I did like them, and I wanted to be better at them. And I don't know. I think there is something about sports than this continuous, I will be better than who I am today, the next day if I keep training. And this continuous
Mm-hmm,
growth
mm-hmm.
towards betterment is something that's really reflected in sports. Continuous training, continuously working with your body and your mind. And so I got better and I got pretty good at football. And I've always been in a better, more clear state of mind when I was able to exercise a lot.
Yeah,
Mostly because I have too much energy to do anything other than like vigorous exercise with. From there, I went to college and uh, I did track, I did ultimate frisbee, there's lifting, a lot of other just kind of miscellaneous things along those lines. And then once I got to Portland, that kind of disappeared. I had racquetball for a little bit, but essentially the exercise kind of got reduced a lot. I think it definitely played into the increase in symptoms. It was just not being able to exercise as much as I was used to. And so really, the only thing that I was able to do in Portland, and this was only for a couple of months, was what's called boohurt. Um, and if you're not familiar with what boohurt is, it's essentially like gladiatorial combat, but with like medieval weaponry. And it's not like LARPing. It is like full on, like you're wearing pounds and pounds and of metal armor and hitting each other with blunt axes, and it's like a last person standing, and it's really fun. And I wish I could have been in it for longer before I had to leave Portland, but once I got back, and I was just dealing with a lot of the fallout from leaving Portland, from trying to put all the pieces back together. Boxing was something that really helped me. Just getting back into a routine, training for something, trying to better myself, trying to get better at something, both mentally as well as physically, is something that I credit for my stability and being able to take my life back. So I think that why boxing and physicality and trying to be better as both mind and body is why it appears, especially towards the end of the poem,
Beautiful.
especially towards the
Yeah.
end of the collection.
Oh, I love that. I love it. Yeah. Yes. So, um, you talked about the image, the hallucinations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't need to revisit that part, but my question more now is about the hallucinogenic imagery in your poetry,
Mm-hmm.
because it is very front and center. And not only is it in the words, but it's also, and I mean, nobody else has seen this book except for us and your ARC team, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard for me to describe this to potential readers and maybe those that are joining us, or maybe those that are going to be watching this later. But the poetry in this book, the hallucinogenic imagery is vivid. Not, like I said, not only in words, but in the aesthetic, the way that the poetry is formatted, and it's beautiful. Can you talk a little bit about, just in general, within the poetry, how you translate such complex and often overwhelming experiences into art?
Yeah.
What was it? Did you see this when you were writing the poems? Did you see the format? Did you see the layout? Or was that something that came afterward?
Um, it's kind of both. So there's a period of poems which are the ones I'll have to talk a little bit about the history of this book for this to make sense. So I've tried to publish a manuscript version of this that was less explicitly connected to me. That was more so just a collection of poems and not necessarily memoir. Yeah. And from there, I had exercised all of the poems that specifically related to me and to the hallucinogenic imagery and to all of those things because well, I just I wasn't ready to talk about that stuff yet. I didn't think that talking about that in a memoir form would be like an option available to me. So I just kind of either hid it or buried it or just removed it from the collections, even though some of those poems in there are ones that I'm very attached to. But once you, as well as a couple of other friends and editors, let me know that this would be something I could do, that this was a story that should be told, I brought them back in. These are the like darkest, most kind of terrifying things that I've ever written. And they come from this whole kind of period of when I was in Portland, just gradually getting worse and worse and worse. So I was still in the MFA program while I was in Portland, so I was still continuously generating things, but it wasn't necessarily of sound mind either. And so a lot of these poems were in like a very crude form by that point, just kind of all over the place, not necessarily organized or cohesive at all. But they did have the experiences kind of packed into them. The visuals, the imagery, the different types of things I was experiencing, but they were not in any way like readable to anyone. So for the most part, those like worst and darkest poems that depict hallucinations, were things that I had written while I was getting worse, but then definitely revisited once I brought them back into this manuscript. So they have been cleaned up a bit. They have been tried to be reined in, to be a little bit more coherent and less like aggressively antagonistic to my readers.
They're
Um,
beautiful. They're
yeah,
beautiful. They're beautiful. I
yeah,
know
but
you don't take the compliments, but I'm just telling you. I'm telling
okay,
the readers. I'm telling the readers. It's beautiful.
yeah. Um, I don't know if that answers the question.
It does.
Okay.
It does. It does. And I think more so what's going to answer this question is when people purchase the book and look at and start reading, and it because there is such a connection, like between the poetry and the aesthetic. Um, I'm biased. I know. I published the book, and I've been working with Anton for over a year. Because when we first started this, it was just, hey, take a look at these poems. What do you think? And I
Mm.
did, and I think that was like in October or something like that of last year.
Yep.
And I about fell out of my chair. I couldn't put it down. I was so excited, and I didn't want to like be this fangirl, this 54-year-old fangirl. But I saw something in the work that I have never seen before. And so I feel like I want every single person to read this book, because it is just there's just something so it's like, and it's unlike anything that's out there. Um, and the beauty in it, really, that yes, the vivid imagery, the hallucinations, just but the way that you show your readers exactly what you're saying. And that's, when I tell people it's poetry, I want to say, but don't get hung up on the poetry part of it.
Hmm.
Don't get hung up on the poetry, because some people just don't understand poetry, right? They don't get it. They don't give it a chance. What I find
Yeah.
is people don't give poetry a chance. If you just get it, but this book helps a reader give poetry a chance, right?
Yeah.
And at least in my opinion, it does. So, I mean, I don't know, that's just my 2 cents worth, but that's how I feel about it. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm not, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, Anton. So there. Anyway, I want to talk about being a father. I mean, you're experiencing fatherhood.
Hmm.
And we're almost done. We're almost done with the questions, but just a few more. And then we're gonna do this again. So there'll be more things that we talk about. And I'm hoping that the next time, Anton, unless you've got something you want to read now, but I'm hoping that the next time I would love for you to read a few things.
Yeah.
Maybe if you'd like to read tonight, read something tonight. But if
I could
not,
absolutely. Yeah.
I would love for you to read something tonight.
Yeah.
So, but let's go back to being a dad,
Hmm.
experiencing fatherhood. How has being a father impacted your perspective on your mental health, and how did it influence the way you wrote about your experience?
Yeah. This is of all the questions, this is the one that is the hardest to answer. Mostly because it's um, the thing that uh, it's it's how I did the most damage, and it's one of the reasons why, like, uh, the reasons I feel the way I do. While why this is like, yes, poetry and like publication is something to be celebrated, but also at the same time, this is a constant reminder that I need to be better than what I was, and I don't know if I'm trying to make those strides, but I'm not fully able to. So this question's rough, but once I was in Portland, I never had a relationship of any kind in high school or college, and the the first person I had a relationship with is someone I like pretty much married. I had a ceremony and everything, but I just never turned in the paperwork. It was never legal. But the person that I was with had 4 children already. And then we had another. And this was during such an unusual time as well. In 2019 and 2020, if you were in Oregon or Portland, especially, 2019, the summer and the fall, it was on fire. There were riots for George Floyd and all the riots about the police and things along those lines. There was all kinds of things happening in Portland, and most of the place it was on fire. Not just metaphorically, but literally, like you couldn't breathe.
Right, for sure. Yeah.
And so we had to evacuate as well. And then
COVID.
yeah, but even before COVID, there is a winter. So Portland doesn't really get like winters like Illinois does, where I currently live. But they get like these ridiculous ice storms, and it's so hilly that there's nothing you can really do about it. And where we lived was in just kind of surrounded by massive sequoia trees that were all very old, and the ice weighed on them, and it started bringing down all of these trees around us. You could hear them coming down from miles away, and it was like every minute or so a tree would fall and crash into another thing. 2 of them almost hit our house, but missed by like inches and hit our neighbor's car instead.
Oh, geez.
So like there was this so everything was on fire. The environment was not great. I was working 3 jobs. I was trying to get my MFA, and I was trying to assist in raising 5 children, while trying to manage these symptoms.
Talk about stress.
Yes, this is not a conducive environment, and especially as I got worse and worse, it was I was worrying about being a danger to myself as well as to the children. There was nothing I could really do to control anything. I couldn't mitigate the stress or create a better environment for what was going on. And so it forced me to leave. And it's not something that I want to blame on the illness either. I don't think I can do that. It's a responsibility that I still have, that I'm not shying away from just because of the illness. But at the same time, I have to be very real about it too. And it was really hard to do. Helping raise these kids, being a father of my own, and watching him grow up. I was only there for about a year with him before I had to leave. But so now it's more so, I still visit. I still go there during the summers. I still go there during the winters, but it is observed, and it's reasonable to ask that of. So hopefully I will, once he is older, and I will be able to have these visits unobserved, where I can take him to do things, and I can make it out there more often. Or there's so many things that I want to do, that I should be doing already that I'm currently not. And it is something that it's a reminder every day that I still need to be better. I still need to, there are still parts of me that I want to change, that I still dislike about myself, but it's okay to recognize that and to want to be better and to keep moving forward as much as I can.
It is, Anton, and just so everybody knows too that you read these questions before I asked these questions to you.
Absolutely.
So
I still
I am
struggle
not.
with
Yeah.
it.
Well, no, I know, but I don't want people to think that I'm like forcing things on you. That this was an agreed upon question. But what I really want to say is thank you again for sharing that, because through your vulnerability, another cliche word, I get it, I know, but it is what it is, okay? And the mother in me, because I'm way older than you, of course, the mother in me says, looks at you, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you are bringing forth for people. Because again, cliche, even if you help one person, even if somebody out there just listens and hears and can connect with this, with what you're saying, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
humanity at the end of the day, and I appreciate that, and I just want to thank you for that. Um, I want to thank you for that. This is
Yeah.
really special. This is a really special live conversation, and I really appreciate it.
Hmm.
Um, I really do, and I know there are people out there that appreciate it as well. Um, so what I'd like to do is, as we've been talking a long time, and I'm just thrilled about it, and um, I feel like even though I had all these conversations, all these questions, I feel like you just sort of segued into all of them perfectly without me even having to ask. But I would love it if you are comfortable reading something.
Yeah.
If you would like to share something with the viewers and the future viewers, and I would love for you to read something. So the floor is yours, Anton.
Okay. So picking is difficult, especially since most of these poems, especially the ones that I think are the most compelling, are like 20 pages long. um, so um,
You could just
the
read a little part of one.
yeah, I'm gonna read the first one in the collection, and then I think I'll read. We'll do. We'll do. I went walking. So both of them will be in the first part. One of them is much shorter. The other one is a little bit on the longer side, but I think they both kind of capture a lot of kind of the aesthetic of what's going on. And
Beautiful.
okay, so man, so this will be a little bit of a detriment because you cannot see how they are on the page.
I know,
Um,
and the first one is is hemisphere.
yeah.
I
So
mean, I've only read this 50,000 times,
yeah.
so I know the titles, Anton.
Yeah. So both Hemisphere and I, when walking, I mean, all of the poems essentially do use white space, do play with the form. There's few that do not. So there's no really way to get around it, but it's something that I will want to acknowledge to people who
Yep.
can't see what I'm reading. Hemisphere is organized and it functions as kind of an introduction to uh, the work. It also functions as a way of combining both the lineated elements as well as the prose elements.
I'm going to do
Um,
something real quick, Anton, and then I don't know, can you see that at all?
it'll be reversed for your viewers, but
Yeah,
yeah. So it
yeah.
shows
It'll
how
be
it is.
right. It'll be
Yep.
reversed. But I just wanted to give people an idea of what we were talking about when we said hemisphere. So just to kind, and then they'll have to buy the
Yeah.
book. So there's
So
my sales pitch.
yeah. The first chunk of it is just meant to be lineated, meant to be a little bit more scrambled, meant to kind of look like half a globe,
Yep.
hence the title. But I think that's enough of me talking, and I can read, and then we'll jump to I went walking. But
Perfect.
hemisphere is this? No, this is how poems break. An apoptosis of syntax. A syntax for light and language breaks cacophony into numerous sullen bells and chimes. We are all chimes, and chiming Mr. X in flavor tones, and I knocked over a vase of flowers at the funeral service. The carpet gurgled and punched floorboards, petals drifting down, never finding tilled ground. I'm sideways with the curvature of the earth because booze spins too fast. Apoptosis. A guest at a ball of cancer victims. No, they didn't victim. They hit the ground a little faster than me. I'm no more than bones scraping across sandpaper, but I'm tired of delineation, so I'll try prose. We are here to bury my cousin and contemplate what's next. Imagine with me the above white space where Earth is intangible. These words, your stars, and for once we are allowed to grasp them without light speed. It's an old violence, memory and its consequence, that you would have to pay so much just to remember pleasant things, like flooring a golf cart through a cornfield. Love haunts just as much as any ghost. It drives hiccups down paths of pain left in the reverse seats of the front row pews. Fog racked by the pursuits of wonder, wonderful pain, and what resurrection looks like in reverse. But I wasn't sure about what's next, ascension or extinction, so I tipped over a candle too, and the flame still points up. Nothing sideways about it. Fire eats the dead tissue, energy trapped in things once alive. In this moment, this is my confirmation that my cousin was with God. That doesn't mean I'm not upset. I gave the eulogy, and the words bounced off stained glass. They are striving ceaselessly still to find a place of their own. The action of eulogy is the hemisphere made for me. I play hopscotch across this freshly drawn, soon gone horizon. The imaginary haunt between earth and stars, grounded and abstract, the living and the not. It's hard to say dead. But let the final words these dead ears hear be ones constantly approaching the asymptote of ineffable. Let this vision improve with the lens of our welling tears. Let them destroy us in their very utterance, for once spoken, it is unmaking.
It's beautiful. Yep, that's, and the aesthetic is even more powerful. And that's an example of the hybrid, where you start in poetry and you end in prose. Beautiful. Perfection. And now you're going to read I Went Walking. Correct?
Yep. So it is longer. It is 9 pages, I think, in the book format. Is that all right?
Yes. This is your time, Anton,
Okay.
and you read.
Okay. So both of them are a little bit more narratively driven. The other one was talked about me giving the eulogy for my cousin who died while he was in high school. This one brings that back up as well. It brings up a little bit more about families. I've had to give, it seems like I'm kind of responsible for life cycle rituals in my family. So I had to give the eulogies a couple times. And I am now ordained and just proceeded over the marriage of my cousin. And
Yeah, that's right. You did share that with me.
yeah. So things like that do pop up a little bit, but it's a little bit more about family history, about me traveling around the country while still kind of experiencing symptoms, but not necessarily knowing what they are. It's a little bit more literary, being that there are more biblical references and references to Goethe's Faust.
Yes.
There is, yeah, the aesthetic of this is kind of walking all over the place, just kind of seamlessly like wandering.
Yep.
And there's a couple of poems like this that are wandering about. One of the things that I experienced a lot is being kind of unable to sit down and stand still. I'm currently standing. I have a standing desk because I can't sit still.
Because you can't sit still. There you go. Exactly.
So this talks a little bit about it on walking around and wandering is a big part of the collection, both for members of my family as well as for myself, and we call it the Jones case. So that'll get referenced to. But,
Perfect.
all right, here we go.
Okay.
I went walking. I stubbed my toes on both coasts, tripping over Nebraska and landing at Monument Valley. For reeling the landscape in too fast, I like to consume. I overlook people like I did fruits of the soil, but this mirror less walked and more dawdled. A backpack strung over each shoulder. As he stumbled and tripped on his feet and his slurs, he followed the shadow of me. That went the other way. What was said in having no home, in his cargo pants and boots, scraps of hair left and eyes that couldn't come to rest, just parsley. I shirked another street. It's just another version of me. Another Cain who had bashed an Abel and set out after God had cursed the nature he made. He called me once too, put a whisper in my head, and commanded, "Go walking." And I did. Walked to the other side, a ridge of pines rose up to greet me, and I was no closer to God than before I walked, since the voice of God was one of my first auditory intrusions. It made me wonder if the devil was also capable of miracles, had the time, the longing to talk directly to me. I kept walking and found Seattle and Needle where more canes sat beneath the shade of metal proximate and cardboard intimate, injecting the babble in their veins, and their future scared me to action. I felt more in danger of hell for watching than falling. Mission work and forest fires, Clay Elm, Washington, and we went into that valley like a comet. The mountains pressed up their hands to catch the earth's blue hide. Goosebumps jumped on my skin as holy music blasted away the scenery I saw with imaginary eyes. And I felt noble without having done anything right, transcendent with feet firmly planted on the land. But the saddest thing was, I tried to recreate those moments, painting a fence, setting a deck, rebuilding communities after disasters, but the moments eluded me every time. I wanted evidence that my memories were real, and I can't tell if failing to recreate them meant that they were. At my first funeral, they asked me to write the eulogy and be the last goodbye. I complied and breathed the distance that separates the beloved and the casket with my frail, shaking voice. A voice that only wanted to go back to childhood and Applebee's in Punta Gorda, where I could revisit the places he touched. I walked his new home on my left shoulder out of his church with 5 others. My grandpa on my mom's side, who seemed to always walk in the right direction, even with Lewy body dementia. He was always so kind, and death does not deserve him. My cousin died before I could, when I walked out in front of him in Chicago. He lagged behind when I tried to press the pace. For the departing train, we almost missed. He got on another train. I know why he was walking slow, and I couldn't see it until I walked again in that city where everyone walks so fast, and crawls so slow, and cries so fast, and heals so slow. So, is it a sin to blame God when he unmakes his own creation? A grandpa and a cousin left their shoes by the door and went walking elsewhere. For what reason should we be strong when being strong, 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 strong means you can't break? And we did. We played football after we buried a senior in high school to show we could break, be more than our tears. But here I am, and there you are. I can't write about walking without walking over her. And is it a sin to blame God for making her the reason I think I lost my soul? Or is my devil already there? I was an owl watching her night. As the walls went up, hands closed, Laniakea would have let the world use her as a dish rag to wash its own feet. But even the world knew better, most of the time. Mine were dirty. She made me feel like steel wool, and terrified, and ecstatic, and feeble, and boundless. And I was living out of my mind. It was pathetic, really. I would make sure I walked down the hallway at a precise time, hoping she would be passing and throw me a smile. But if my memory served me correctly, I romanticized the hell out of it. If I can't spite myself, I don't trust anyone else to do it, as often as I need to anyway. God knows Laniakea never did. And is it a sin if I started to call her Gretchen instead, giving me a more accurate name? Someone better stare at the ceiling for me. I was trying not to fall asleep with her on my mind. It was dangerous. And her friend and my teammates committed suicide, which mangled her entirely almost in her sleep. Her hair changed color, and her eyes found interest in the ground, averting any hand that came her way. I wanted to save. Simple. If I was an honest man, but I'm a liar. All the same, I went walking. After his suicide, I took idealism as penance, just holding on to what's left before it got out of hand, which it already was, even before I chucked it. I wrote her letters from a basement to my heart, and I'll swear until I die the basement was still a part of my heart and not a part of something else. I sent her a letter when I was in Michigan, Ohio, Maryland, Iowa. Please hear me when I say, though a devil carried me around the country, I was never distracted from you, even when I tried to be. Year after year, the letters told a little bit more of what I was hiding to say. Feel this hand. It wants to heal your heart. But I squeezed it instead. And didn't even have the courtesy to clean up the mess. A man who had courted her stopped suddenly and said that Gretchen was tainted meat, that she was mad with grief. And I howled inside. How dare he use that name, revealed that though I never intended to sell my soul for evil, I would have damned myself without the help of a devil. I wanted so badly to scrape the tissue out of that man's neck, to savage his face, because I'm an animal again, because I refused to let any more lambs be sacrificed, because even in hindsight, I prayed that God would let me tread there again as Cain, because I'm hungry and I'm able, and on principle, I should claw and chew and grind and swallow, and I got my dance. When Gretchen answered my letter after it got lost in the mail, she found me 2 days before and I couldn't look her in the eyes because she was finally alive inside, and I did my worst to kill it again. I'm imaginary tears. I left her in the cold, too ashamed to ask for an answer, too scared of the self I was becoming, and I went to spend my nights alone. I went to walk these years alone. Unlike her, walking never went walking with me. There are no antagonists here, only time. The devils are the ones I hallucinate, and I, an animal again, I walked out with a whimper. That was the loudest noise that I could make. There's been a boot on my throat for so long. I know there's a place where my feet have raptured shadows, where mist coils around passing limbs, cling to some ancient conquering spirit who had his face set on what the destination meant and not the walk, where every person is an asterisk. Every asterisk is a step in the wrong direction, without even dementia as an excuse. I hope to learn from. I hope this examination forces me to gurgle and rinse so my feet don't step through the black mold floor. I will take excursions through crypts and swallow droughts in my stride, that Jones pace, restlessness incarnate. I have a neck that defies compunction, so when I hear the foreman digging my grave, I will stride on even still. I will build furniture out of cinder blocks, useless though they be, and stack sandstone mesas, create a monument valley for Mephisto, out of the places I walked, and the voices I hallucinated, to and toward, through and over, and always away.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you for reading that. That is just, ladies and gentlemen, just the tip of the iceberg with this book. I will definitely be putting the link in the bio so you all can purchase this pre-order. Pre-orders will be open for another week, and then we close them because we have to fill them. We'll get them printed and filled. And then there will be another link up there for Pub Day, which is December the 3rd. We will be chatting with Anton again. So we'll definitely be chatting. We'll talk on Pub Day. Tell your friends, tell everybody you know about this book, because it is a book that must be read, a story that must be told, and a story that no matter who you are, excuse me, or what your struggles are in life, this is something that you will absolutely be able to relate to. Because again, this is poetry, and poetry is something that we can all see ourselves in. And Anton has done a brilliant job of sharing his story through poetry and a little bit of prose, and the vulnerability that he has shown and that he's brought forth. So thank you, Anton. This was like very special. And thank you so much for your vulnerability, for opening up, for your honesty, and for just being you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and this opportunity as well.
And all right, ladies and gentlemen, well, thank you for joining us. And we'll let you know when we're going to have another one. The replay will be posted here on Instagram and on Facebook. And again, we'll probably, I think we said, what, 2 weeks or so, or 3 weeks or something like that. I can't remember. It's in my notes. Yeah. We'll be meeting again, though, shortly. So, Anton, thank you so much. And everybody that joined us, thank you. And we will see you again soon. Bye, Anton.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.